Hey everybody, welcome back. Sports guy Chris here, checking in again with another bubble update. We had some big games last night, and the ever-changing bubble, continues to throw us for some loops here. First of all, the final weekend of the regular season is upon us. It is Friday. There's a few conference tournaments going, so a lot of good stuff going on in the world of college basketball. We are on our final weekend, so let's jump right into it. There were a handful of games that impacted the bubble last night, and I have to tell you, just when you think maybe we're starting to figure it out a little bit, we get thrown for a little bit of a loop, excuse me. And the two teams in particular that I'm referring to both reside in the Pac-12. Arizona State was in action at home against Washington, who is a cellar dweller in the Pac-12, despite a very good run through their non-conference. And the Sun Devils promptly dropped that one at home last night, 90-83. It was just Washington's fourth win in the conference. They're just 4-13 in Pac-12 play. So, needless to say, that will qualify as a bad loss. It hurts the Sun Devils a little bit. It didn't quite knock them out of the field. They are still clinging to one of the last four in at the moment. And again, they do have a fairly solid schedule within the conference. They're getting a big boost from a victory over Oregon. And they have a road win, 74-69 at Stanford. That's keeping them ahead of Stanford right now, which is important, which brings me to the Cardinal. They were in action last night at Oregon State. Again, another team not doing particularly well in Pac-12 play. The Beavers came into last night's game at just 5-11 in Pac-12 play. And Stanford could not get it done. They lost 68-65 at Oregon State. And the reason that was a little more significant was that means Stanford was actually swept by Oregon State. Oregon State now just 6-11 in Pac-12 play, with two of those wins coming over Stanford. So not a good time for the Cardinal to drop that one. They were still in last four in territory. You start to look at Stanford's resume. They do have a non-conference blowout over Oklahoma, which is certainly helping. The 74-59 victory at UCLA earlier in the season certainly helps as well. It's looking better. And they have the home win over Colorado, the home win over Oregon. That is pretty much their resume. So, and then you take a look at, some of their losses within the league. Swept by Oregon State. They lost at Cal, who's another cellar dweller here, 52-50. And they lost at Utah as well, and then of course the loss to Arizona State. So you look at Stanford, they still have the really solid metrics. They only dropped 2 spots in the net, so they went from 25 to 27. The strength of schedule 75, and then outside of that win over Oklahoma, they didn't really do much in non-conference. So the resume is there somewhat, not as elaborate as some other teams. So Stanford very much on the bubble. That loss yesterday, being now that they were swept by Oregon State, I actually dropped them out of the field. They are the first team out as of right now, and I actually bumped Purdue up and in, even though the Boilermakers are 16-14 overall. You look at Purdue's resume, and when you start to compare them to teams like Arizona State, Stanford, NC State, Mississippi State, Texas, all of these teams, and their resume stacks up very, very good. You look at the bad losses. They have one, really. It was at Nebraska. That's not a good loss. Nebraska's in last place in the league, so 70-56. But then you look at what they were able to do resume-wise, and, they've got a sweep of Iowa, who's a very good team, including a 104-68 blowout of Iowa at home. They beat Wisconsin by 19 at home. They beat Michigan State 71-42 at home. They have a non-conference blowout of Virginia 69-40, and they have a sweep of Indiana. So you look at Purdue's resume within the league and then outside of the league, that win over Virginia is certainly helping out as well. Texas stays in the last four in category. They move up a spot there. They have a non-conference win over Purdue, so that's helping them as well. Texas is going to need to keep winning. Their metrics are getting better. The 31 strength of schedule is helping. So, but back into last night. So we touched on the two Pac-12 teams that unfortunately made their situations a little dicier. I now have Arizona State as the second to last four in, with Purdue right behind them. Of course, Stanford is the first team out as of right now. there was one other significant game last night as far as how it impacted the bubble, and it was a big one in the American Athletic Conference. We had Wichita State visiting Memphis. I had the Shockers still in. They were in the last four bye territory, but honestly, they needed a win. They really couldn't afford to go to Memphis and lose that game to another bubble team, and they did just that. Memphis got another big win, 68-60. That's now a couple in the last three games for Memphis as they were able to take care of Houston as well, not all that long ago, just a couple games ago. So now you take a look there, and Wichita State, that loss dropped them to 10-7 in the American, 22-8 overall. But you start to take a look at Wichita State's resume. They've been swept now by Cincinnati, which is not good, and they're. You start to look at them, and the resume is really kind of lacking overall. So when you look at Wichita State, you're looking at the win at home over Memphis early in the year. Of course, they just lost on the road to them. They do have a non-conference win over Oklahoma, 80-75, and they have a non-conference win at South Carolina, 70-47. South Carolina is, it's just not quite good enough to be on the bubble. They were there for a little bit here during the season, but just not quite enough for the Gamecocks to get themselves back on the bubble. So when you're looking at Wichita State, and then you look within the league, swept by Cincinnati, the loss last night at Memphis. They also have a loss at Tulsa. They have a loss at Temple. And that's pretty much it. And you look at it, and it's really, kind of underwhelming despite fairly solid metrics for the Shockers. I mean, they're still a 48 net, which is good. 73 strength of schedule, which is okay. So, but Memphis actually will bump ahead of them now. Memphis has a more impressive resume. A big part of that is a couple non-conference victories. They have a win over Tennessee on the road, and then a win over NC State as well, two fellow bubble teams, and that's really helping Memphis right now. Wichita State just doesn't have that. They've got the Oklahoma win, and that's it. So Wichita State needs some victories. They are still very much in the bubble. That loss dropped them out of the field and actually back into the next category right behind Memphis. So, a big win for Memphis last night, a tough loss for Wichita State. The Shockers now have some work to do, and we're starting to shape up. It's going to be a very interesting American Athletic Conference tournament next week and SEC Conference tournament next week, because you're going to have Mississippi State, Arkansas potentially battling for an at-large bid, and you've got Cincinnati, Memphis, Wichita State, Tulsa, all in the mix in the American for an at-large bid. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. The other big winner last night who, wasn't in action was Tulsa. They actually get a boost from Houston losing. Houston was on the road at UConn, and they fell 77-71. The reason that gives Tulsa a boost is it clinches at least a share of the American Athletic Conference title for Tulsa. They're 13-4, and they're now a full game in first place. They're ahead of both Houston and Cincinnati, who are both 12-5 in league play. So Tulsa gets a boost. It's going to be interesting to see. Their resume is still kind of lacking overall, but they're going to win at least a share of the American Athletic regular season. They're 21-9 overall. So again, it's going to be interesting to see what the committee does there. So another important outcome to despite Tulsa not playing, getting a boost. So after last night's games, this is how I see the bubble heading into the final weekend of the regular season. The last four byes, UCLA, Richmond, Indiana, all stay the same. Xavier moved up into that category without having to play last night. Again, thanks to the shortcomings of some of those last four in teams in Wichita State last night. So last four byes, UCLA, Richmond, Indiana, Xavier. The last four in now are Cincinnati. The Bearcats have jumped back into the field. Texas, Arizona State, and Purdue. And the first four out, Stanford, NC State, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. Mississippi State slides ahead of Arkansas because of their sweep of the Razorbacks during the regular season in the SEC. But two teams that are very similar, 19-11 overall. Metrics are both very, very similar. So as far as net strength of schedule, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there in the SEC tournament. And then in order, this would be the next group of teams. Memphis Moving up, Wichita State, followed by Utah State, who got a victory over New Mexico in the Mountain West tournament last night. Tennessee, Tulsa, Rhode Island, who continues to slide back, Duquesne, and then Furman, rounding out the next category. That is how I see the bubble as we head into the final weekend of the college hoops regular season. Again, conference tournaments are in action. We have more important games tonight and, of course, a full Saturday and Sunday slate. I will be back again tomorrow with another video updating you on the bubble and NCAA tournament projections. Happy Friday, everybody. Have a great weekend. And Sports Guy Chris just checking in with a bubble update. I'll be back at you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.